For anyone who grew up in the 80s or 90s, the McDonald's PlayPlace wasn't just an add-on to your cheeseburger combo. It was the main event, the real prize beyond the Happy Meal toy. It transformed what could have been a routine, maybe even boring family lunch, into a full-blown sensory overload, an adrenaline-pumping mission of slides, ball pits, and sticky socks. It was the place where you'd abandon your meal halfway through just to get the best spot at the top of the spiral slide, where your shoes disappeared into a pile of sneakers and Velcro-strapped sandals near the door, and where screaming with joy, or fear, was simply part of the soundtrack. For an entire generation of kids raised on Saturday morning cartoons and brightly colored sugar cereals, those indoor playgrounds were as thrilling as any amusement park. Maybe more so because they were free with fries. You didn't need tickets. You just needed a patient adult, a chicken McNuggets combo, and maybe an extra set of clothes in case things got out of hand. Even if you left with rug burns, ketchup-stained sleeves, and the smell of fryer grease fused into your hair, you knew it was worth it. But before the tubes and tunnels, before the towering plastic castles filled with shouting kids and the unmistakable scent of synthetic cheese, it all started with something much smaller and simpler. In 1971, in Chula Vista, California, McDonald's installed its very first playground behind one of its restaurants. At the time, it wasn't a marketing juggernaut or a major strategic move. It was just a modest backyard-style play area, a swing set, and some climbing bars tossed behind the restaurant to keep kids busy while parents finished their coffee. But it quickly became clear that this wasn't just a bit of added charm. It was a strategic goldmine. Sales jumped, parents lingered longer, kids begged to go back. What began as an experiment soon became a template for something much bigger. By 1972, the idea was formalized and rebranded as McDonaldland Play Areas, a fusion of playground equipment and cartoonish storytelling that brought the growing McDonald's universe to life. These weren't just playgrounds. They were branded fantasies. Steel and plastic representations of McDonaldland characters filled the spaces, turning parking lot edges and backyard corners into surreal, child-sized worlds. Officer Big Mac, a towering bun-headed figure, doubled as a jail-themed jungle gym. Children could climb inside his mouth and peek through bars like tiny inmates in a meat-themed cell. The Hamburglar appeared in steel or fiberglass, his striped outfit hinting at mischief as kids clambered up and over his arms and face. Captain Crook, remember him? Offered a spiral slide and nautical nonsense. There were strange additions, too. Fountains shaped like filet-o-fish sandwiches, trees that grew plastic apple pies, benches shaped like French fries, and characters whose names no adult could remember, but every kid instantly recognized. The entire concept was a fast food fever dream, a blend of marketing, play, and low-key mayhem. As the 70s rolled into the early 80s, these playgrounds exploded in number. They began cropping up across suburbs and cities in drive-thru heavy locations and family-oriented neighborhoods. They became part of the McDonald's identity. Families planned weekend outings around them. Birthday parties were hosted beneath their arches. Play areas became a quiet arms race between franchises. Who could get the newest slide, the tallest climber, the coolest character addition? But the real revolution came when someone at corporate realized that outdoor equipment had limits. Weather, rain, snow, blazing summer heat, it all cut into playtime, which in turn cut into mealtime. So, McDonald's did what only a fast food giant could do. They brought the playgrounds inside. The result was the now iconic indoor PlayPlace. These weren't just additions, they were transformations. A simple restaurant could be remodeled into a 2-story play zone with plastic tunnels, color-coded climbing towers, rope bridges, and observation domes. Suddenly, McDonald's wasn't just the place you went for a quick meal. It was where kids lost track of time, where parents could sit at a Formica table nursing a lukewarm coffee while their children disappeared into a chaotic neon ecosystem. Most PlayPlaces featured thickly padded, rounded structures designed for climbing and crawling. The once dangerous hard metal was replaced with soft vinyl and slick plastic. Safety concerns turned into a design feature, even if the germs hiding inside those padded tubes told a different story. By the 1990s, McDonald's had quietly become the largest operator of playgrounds in America, bigger than many amusement chains, bigger than public parks in some regions. The indoor PlayPlace had reached its peak, and while each one looked slightly different depending on location and franchise owner, they all shared a familiar visual language. The tubes, the slides, the mesh-covered towers, and of course, the multicolored ball pits that kids either loved or feared, depending on what they'd heard happened in them. Some PlayPlaces even had game rooms attached, offering arcade cabinets and redemption prizes, or themed party rooms for birthday blowouts complete with branded cake, and Ronald McDonald himself making awkward appearances. A major shift in McDonald's play strategy arrived in 1991 with the launch of Leaps and Bounds, an ambitious standalone indoor play center concept. Unlike the traditional McDonald's PlayPlaces tucked inside or next to restaurants, these new centers were expansive. Purpose-built facilities, massive warehouse-style spaces filled to the brim with padded platforms, rope swings, ball pits, and multi-level climbing structures. They weren't just an extension of the dining experience. They were a full-fledged entertainment destination for kids, divorced from the burger and fries environment. The premise was bold, yet straightforward. Create a self-contained world where children could burn off endless energy in a safe, controlled setting while parents looked on from a distance or sat down for a slice of pizza. Interestingly, Leaps and Bounds didn't even serve McDonald's food, opting instead for a different menu tailored to the venue. It was a calculated move by the fast food giant to compete directly with Discovery Zone, which at the time was gaining traction as the go-to indoor playground chain across the U.S. Although Leaps and Bounds eventually merged with Discovery Zone in the mid-1990s, the initiative itself was a clear signal that McDonald's wasn't just playing in the margins, it was investing heavily in the business of playtime as a central brand strategy. For me, growing up in the 1980s and 90s, the playpen was the ultimate in burning off energy, especially on long family road trips or driving vacations. I was 14 when the Leaps and Bounds play centers started to appear, so I was a mite too old to enjoy those. But my brother, who was 8, really hit the upper end of the target demographic. While I would usually supervise, standing at the edge or sitting at the highest point so I could always keep him in my field of view, he would be rushing through tubes, sweeping up ladders and down slides like his pants were on fire, giggling all the way. While our parents sat and had their meals, taking a little time off from the mundanity of interstate driving with a bag of fries and a coffee, the playpen stood as a monument to independent daycare and distraction. It was also a really cool place to make friends. I often found I wasn't the only older sibling tasked with keeping an eye on their younger brother or sister as they sped around inside the play place. I remember one time in around 1993 at a McDonald's off I-80 east of Reno, Nevada. When we were on our way to a vacation around Utah, I got chatting to another girl around my age named Dallas. Though ironically, she wasn't from Dallas, but instead Tulsa, Oklahoma. She and her family were on their way to visit her relatives in Sacramento, and it was amazing how, in this maze of color, fabric, and plastic, two girls from totally different parts of the country, living different lives and who would have otherwise never met, shared 20 minutes of each other's existences, like we'd known each other all our lives. My brother, meanwhile, was usually the oldest of the other kids scrambling around the playpen, who would normally range from older toddlers to 10-year-olds, and once they'd burned out their initial burst of energy, they'd sit at the top of the slides talking about whatever young boys liked to talk about in the early 1990s, usually the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Star Wars. These days, everybody would have their noses in their phones. But like anything aimed at children and speedily scaled across thousands of locations, not everything in the world of McDonald's play spaces was Happy Meals and high fives. As much as kids adored the towering structures and the freedom to go wild, the playgrounds brought with them a growing list of hazards that slowly started to catch up with the brand. In the early days, especially throughout the late 70s and 80s, most McDonald's playgrounds were built using heavy steel, with slides and climbers that baked under the summer sun and froze in winter. Children suffered burns from overheated metal, slipped off ladders, got their fingers pinched in moving parts, and fell from heights that today would trigger a dozen safety violations. The biggest dilemma were older kids. As I said, the usual age range on the PlayPlaces were between toddlers and teenagers, and when you get an energetic group like that together, one built like Play-Doh, the other like the armor of a tank, injuries and tears will inevitably follow. My brother was often both the victim and the perpetrator of many an injury caused at the McDonald's PlayPlace, either because he accidentally landed on a younger kid or because he himself was landed on. If it wasn't that, it was accidental kicking, pushing, knocking over, trampling, and anything else that made this island of childhood fun, less magical, and more like a gladiatorial ring in ancient Rome. Of course, not everything was accidental. Predictably, when you get all kinds of kids from all kinds of backgrounds together in one place and turn them loose, some will deliberately want to bully or hurt the others around them. I remember many times having to intervene when aggressive boys and girls would start to abuse the little kids, including my brother. brother, and sometimes it even came to blows. I recall one instance when this particularly aggressive boy gave me a black eye after I dragged him off some toddlers he was squashing by lying on them, and I ended up spending the rest of the week with an ice pack on my face. His parents were jerks, and they told my parents that I was the one to blame for ruining their son's fun. But while that might not have been my finest moment in terms of fighting off a bully, I take comfort in the fact that I did something noble and dignified. If only dignity didn't hurt so much. Anyway, arguably the most infamous of the injury-inducing structures was the Big Mac Climber, a 2-story metal death trap disguised as a whimsical hamburger jail. Its tight ladders, narrow crawl spaces, and grated floors turned it into a claustrophobic nightmare for many kids, especially those who climbed in only to realize they couldn't get out without help. To adults, it may have looked like harmless fun, but for many children, the Big Mac Climber was a trial by fire, and for some, a source of real injury and fear. As reports of accidents increased, so did the legal pressure. Lawsuits began stacking up as parents demanded accountability for the scrapes, sprains, and more serious injuries their kids suffered. By the late 1990s, the metal playgrounds that once stood as icons of fast food childhood had become liabilities. They began disappearing quietly, one by one, without much fanfare. By 1997, the last Big Mac Climber was dismantled, marking the end of an era. The transition to indoor, soft-surface PlayPlaces might have seemed like a safer and more hygienic solution, but the problems didn't disappear. They just changed shape. Although padded tubes and carpeted platforms reduced the number of physical injuries, they introduced a new kind of risk: microbial. The very design that made soft play areas feel cozy and safe also made them incredibly difficult to clean and maintain. Inside those brightly colored tunnels and crawl spaces, children dragged in dirt from the parking lot, smeared food on handrails, drooled on netting, and left behind all manner of bodily fluids. Ball pits became notorious for harboring unseen dangers, not just the occasional lost shoe, but much worse. They turned into breeding grounds for bacteria and viruses, as plastic balls were rarely, if ever, properly sanitized. In some extreme cases, parents and health inspectors discovered used diapers hidden in pit corners, bits of broken glass, and even discarded syringes. While these were outliers, they became urban legends that stuck. By the early 2000s, consumer watchdog groups and local news outlets began running exposés on the hidden filth lurking in PlayPlaces. One particularly damning 2011 study took bacterial swabs from multiple McDonald's playgrounds across the country and found levels of contamination so severe they would have violated basic sanitation codes in any school or medical setting. The findings revealed traces of E. coli, staph, and a host of other bacteria that could cause illness in young children, particularly those with weaker immune systems. What was meant to be a haven for carefree play had, in many cases, become a dirty secret, a place parents began to eye with suspicion, even as their kids begged to go inside. At the same time, public sentiment toward fast food, especially when it came to children, was beginning to shift in a big way. Parents were starting to pay closer attention to what their kids were eating, becoming increasingly health conscious and skeptical of the brightly colored packaging and cartoon mascots that had once been seen as harmless fun. McDonald's, which had long positioned itself as the ultimate destination for family outings, came under mounting criticism for its aggressive marketing tactics directed squarely at kids. Critics argued that the company wasn't just selling burgers and fries, it was selling a lifestyle, and one that wasn't doing children any favors. The growing national conversation around childhood obesity added even more fuel to the fire, casting a harsh spotlight on Happy Meals, playgrounds full of junk food, and the sugary beverages that came with them. Health advocates, educators, and parents began to question whether PlayPlaces were truly places for play or just cleverly disguised delivery systems for empty calories and addictive snacks. Then, in 2004, the release of the documentary Super Size Me threw gasoline on that already burning fire. The film didn't just criticize McDonald's, it indicted the entire fast food industry, and McDonald's became the most visible target. Viewers watched as filmmaker Morgan Spurlock ate nothing but McDonald's for a month and suffered rapid physical and emotional decline. The documentary was hard to ignore, and it forced a public reckoning. Almost overnight, Ronald McDonald, once the smiling face of Happy Meals and televised kid-centric campaigns, began to fade from the spotlight. His presence, once constant on Saturday morning cartoons and birthday party posters, gradually disappeared. McDonald's, sensing the cultural tide turning against it, began a calculated image overhaul. They quietly rolled out healthier menu options. Milk instead of soda, apple slices instead of fries. The portions shrank. The advertisements changed tone. The PlayPlaces, once viewed as essential parts of the family experience, became less of a priority. The clowns, the characters, the wild plastic playgrounds, they started to vanish, one by one. And then came 2020. When the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the globe, nearly every McDonald's indoor dining room in the United States was shut down in a matter of weeks. Along with the chairs, tables, and soda fountains, the PlayPlaces went dark. With public health at the forefront and strict sanitation standards suddenly non-negotiable, the idea of letting kids run wild through communal plastic tunnels and splash into ball pits felt unthinkable. Some PlayPlaces were cordoned off with yellow caution tape. Others were simply locked. Many, though, never reopened at all. As locations remodeled during the pandemic or in its aftermath, PlayPlaces were quietly removed. In their place came sleek, minimalist designs. Hardwood floors, charging stations, self-order kiosks, and an overall vibe more reminiscent of a tech cafe than a kid-friendly pit stop. Drive-thru lanes expanded to accommodate the growing demand for contactless service. The business model was evolving rapidly, and in this new version of fast food, there was little room for massive indoor playgrounds that needed constant cleaning and supervision. Why sink resources into scrubbing plastic tunnels and filtering ball pits when most families were grabbing dinner from their cars and eating at home? Today, the golden era of McDonald's PlayPlaces exists mostly in memory. Only a handful of classic setups remain, usually in smaller towns or independently owned franchise locations that have yet to undergo the corporate-mandated renovations. These holdouts are increasingly rare, and when they're spotted, they feel more like relics than functioning spaces, ghosts of a louder, messier, more tactile time. Still, not all the PlayPlace nostalgia has been lost to the past. Some of the old equipment, signage, and fiberglass characters have been salvaged by collectors, hobbyists, or fans trying to preserve a piece of their childhood. In basements, backyards, and garages across the country, you can find lovingly restored Officer Big Mac jungle gyms and Mayor McCheese benches. On social media, photos of untouched 1990s-era PlayPlaces, complete with faded primary colors, worn plastic slides, and netted crawl spaces, spark instant waves of emotional responses. The comment sections fill up fast. I remember getting stuck in that tunnel for what felt like an hour. That's where I chipped my tooth trying to race my brother down the slide. My mom would take us just so we'd wear ourselves out before she had to do errands. Because for all the grime, all the scrapes, all the questionable hygiene and chaotic energy, McDonald's PlayPlaces were genuinely, undeniably fun. They were exciting in a way that was hard to explain unless you'd been there. They weren't just clean and safe. They were alive, full of laughter, screams, and the wild joy of being a kid with no schedule and no screen in sight. The spaces were imperfect, but so was childhood. You didn't care if your socks got filthy or your hands were sticky with ketchup and soft serve. That was part of the magic. It was messy, it was loud, it was borderline lawless, and it was wonderful. In a world that keeps moving toward more curated, sanitized, and tightly controlled experiences, the memory of crawling through those static-filled tunnels, squinting through scratched plastic domes, and diving into a ball pit with reckless glee feels more and more distant. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. The old McDonald's PlayPlaces didn't just entertain. They gave kids a little space to be wild, to be themselves, and to feel free in a way that's hard to recreate today.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199X, we're here just for you, for you.